She was picking up allergy meds and almond milk when a cop cuffed her in front of strangers. He said she matched a description. He never even checked her ID. What happened next turned the whole state upside down. Renee Alcott didn't have much left to do that day. Just pick up her allergy meds and grab almond milk for her morning smoothies. It was a Friday in mid-March, and the streets of East Point, Georgia were moving slow, like they knew the weekend was coming. She liked to keep her schedule light on Fridays. End the week soft, as she called it. The bag from the pharmacy was still crinkling on the passenger seat as she pulled out onto Washington Road. She adjusted the AC, checked her rear view, and saw it. A DeKalb County cruiser, maybe 2 cars behind. No big deal, but then it changed lanes when she did. She merged left. So did he. Her eyes narrowed. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was just heading the same way, but the way he was creeping up on her bumper made her instinct tense. Renee had worked long enough in the legal system to know the rules, and when they got ignored, she'd spent a decade drafting oversight policy, analyzing officer-involved incidents, helping clean up bad data and bad practices. She believed in the work, and she believed in staying calm. Still, she felt it in her stomach when the lights flared in her rear view. She pulled over immediately, hazard lights blinking, windows already halfway down. Her hands went to the steering wheel. Her ID and registration were already in her purse. She didn't reach for them yet. The officer approached. Mid-40s, pale, thick around the neck. His nameplate said, Dresner. You know why I pulled you over? He asked, voice flat. No, sir, Renee answered, polite but clipped. I wasn't speeding. Was there an issue? Your car matches the description from a call we just got. Possible shoplifting at the Walgreens on Sylvan. Renee blinked. I just came from the CVS. I have my receipt right here. I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle. Her head tilted slightly. Excuse me? Ma'am, step out of the car. Now. Renee kept her voice even. Officer Dresner, I work for the Georgia Department of Justice. I'm a legal strategist. If you give me 1 second, I can... He raised his hand. Everyone says that. Step out. Something in his tone cut through her. This wasn't about procedure. It was power. She unbuckled her seatbelt, opened the door, and stepped out slowly, hands where I can see them. Her palms went up. Open. Clear. He turned her around, gripped her wrists, and cold steel snapped against her skin. She flinched at the sound. Not the cuffs, but how casual he made it seem. You're detaining me for what, exactly? She asked. Do you have a suspect description? Because I didn't take anything. Ma'am, you can argue later. Right now, I'm conducting a field detention based on a reported match. She didn't fight. She didn't yell. She wasn't going to feed the moment. But her jaw was tight as he led her to the sidewalk near her vehicle, placing her in full view of passing drivers. A young woman across the street paused on her porch, pulled out her phone, started recording. Renee looked down at the sidewalk. She counted the cracks, breathed through her nose. She'd read this story before, too many times. But now it was writing itself around her. And she knew what came next wouldn't just be about her. But something in the air shifted. Someone new was about to enter the scene. Sergeant Dresner paced slowly near Renee's car, talking into his radio. He wasn't in a rush, even though he'd just cuffed someone in broad daylight with no clear evidence. Renee stood stiffly beside her rear bumper, hands behind her back, wrists aching already. The asphalt under her heels was warm. It was barely 3 p.m., and the Georgia sun was still sharp. A few more cars slowed as they passed, but no one said anything. You're making a mistake, she said quietly, not yelling, just making sure he heard her. I have my work ID in my purse. I'm not the person you're looking for. Dresner didn't look at her. He was still murmuring into the mic clipped to his vest. I'm just doing my job, he finally muttered. Don't take it personal. She almost laughed. You're doing your job by cuffing a woman without checking her ID first. He turned, walking back toward her like he was tired of the conversation already. You fit the description. Black female, dark-colored SUV, left the scene 10 minutes ago. That's enough for probable cause. Renee stared at him. You and I both know that's not enough. Not legally. Then you should have thought about that before coming around here looking guilty. Guilty of what? Picking up Allegra and oat milk? His jaw flexed. Watch your tone. That part stung. Not because it was loud, because it was familiar. She'd heard it in courtrooms, in meetings, in the way certain men said her name with their mouths twisted sideways. Renee knew that tone didn't mean professional. It meant, you're not supposed to talk back. She glanced at the girl across the street, still recording. A few more neighbors had come out, one standing by their mailbox, another pretending to sweep a porch that didn't need sweeping. Look, Renee said. Open my purse. My work badge is inside. There's also a CVS receipt in the front pocket. I'm not searching your property without backup, he said. And I don't need your badge. You'll get your chance to explain everything downtown. Her mouth dried. Downtown? He really meant to take her in. And if I were a white woman in yoga pants driving a Subaru? She asked, low and even. His eyes narrowed. I don't care what you are, but he did. She could feel it. Dresner grabbed her elbow and started walking her toward his cruiser. His grip wasn't brutal, but it wasn't gentle either. She stumbled slightly on a crack in the sidewalk. He didn't slow down. You're going to regret this, Renee said, still not raising her voice. You're arresting a state lawyer on camera. That's what you're doing. He didn't answer. A voice called out from somewhere behind them. Hey, what's her name? You all know her name? The girl with the phone. She was closer now, walking across the street. Renee looked at her. Renee Alcott. Spell it, the girl yelled. I got you. Reneealcott. I'm putting it on Twitter right now, the girl said. They're going to see this. Dresner yanked Renee's arm a little harder. Keep walking. But the girl wasn't backing down. You don't get to hide anymore. I saw everything. I got it on video, too. He slammed the cruiser door open and guided Renee into the back seat. She didn't resist, but she felt like the door shut more than just the car. It shut the illusion she still had some kind of safety net. He walked around to the front seat, keys jangling. Renee leaned her head back, tried to slow her breathing. She was nobody's martyr. She hated stories like this. She'd spent her life trying to keep them from happening to other people. But now she was locked in the center of one, and the irony had a bitter taste. But someone was already watching from a distance, someone who knew exactly who she was. The back seat of a patrol car isn't made for comfort. The plastic felt hot beneath Renee's legs, the cuffs pressing hard into the leather seat behind her. She couldn't shift without her wrists digging into her spine. From this angle she couldn't see much, just rooftops, flashes of movement from the corner of her eye, and a reflection of her own face in the plexiglass divider. Her curls had started to flatten against her forehead. Sweat clung to her jawline. But it wasn't the heat making her feel sick. She had never been arrested. Not once. Not as a teenager, not as a student, not in her 15 years of working in state law. And now she was sitting in a police cruiser because someone saw "Black Woman, SUV," and didn't care to look further. Dresner stood outside talking to someone over the radio again. His voice was low, irritated, impatient. He looked over his shoulder at the crowd that was slowly forming. A man in scrubs, someone holding a toddler, the girl with the phone still filming. "You'll need to go home," Dresner barked. "Back up." But nobody moved. The girl filming stepped closer. "She didn't do anything. You didn't even read her rights." "She ain't under arrest," he snapped. "She's being detained." "That's funny," the girl muttered. "Then why is she in the car with cuffs on?" Another man chimed in. "This what y'all do now? Grab random folks outside pharmacies?" Renee could barely hear them, but she could feel the energy shifting. She wasn't invisible anymore. People were watching, and more importantly, they were questioning. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the noise. "Sergeant Dresner!" It wasn't loud, but it was firm. Renee turned her head as much as she could. A man in a crisp grey uniform had just arrived, stepping out of an unmarked department vehicle. "Lieutenant Blanchard," Dresner said, eyes narrowing slightly. "Didn't expect you." "Clearly," the lieutenant replied, walking straight toward the cruiser. Blanchard was sharp, clean-shaven, early 50s. His voice didn't waver, and he wasn't trying to win points with anyone. He looked through the back window of the cruiser. Locked eyes with Renee. "Is that who I think it is?" She matched the vehicle description, Dresner said quickly, and she got defensive when I asked her to step out. She got defensive? Blanchard cut him off. That's Attorney Alcott, from the AG's office. Dresner blinked. Wait, what? You arrested a senior state legal strategist over almond milk and allergy pills? Dresner shifted on his feet. She said that, yeah, and you didn't check her ID? I was waiting for backup. You are the backup. Silence hung in the air like fog. Blanchard didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just walked to the cruiser, opened the door, and leaned in. Miss Alcott, he said softly. I'm Lieutenant Blanchard. I recognize you from the ethics testimony last month. I'm going to get you out of these cuffs, all right? She gave a small nod, her face unreadable. He unlocked the cuffs himself, helped her sit forward and step out carefully. The air felt cooler once she was upright. As soon as she was free, she rubbed her wrists and turned to look at Dresner. I told you. Dresner avoided her gaze. Blanchard turned to him. We're going to have a conversation. Right now. Away from everyone. He gestured toward the squad car. Dresner walked ahead, his steps heavier now. The crowd across the street was still recording, but now the murmurs had turned into pointed questions. You're always this quick to cuff people? She didn't even look like she was running from anything. She literally had a receipt in her hand. Renee stood there for another moment. She could have gotten into her own car and driven away right then, but she stayed still. The cameras were still rolling, and so was the story. Her silence was loud enough, but she didn't yet realize how far this moment would travel and how fast. Blanchard led Dresner a few feet away, behind the cruiser, near the edge of the CVS lot where the pavement gave way to patchy grass. Their conversation was quiet, but Renee could still see the sharp gestures, the way Blanchard's hand moved once across his chest, measured, restrained, but firm. Dresner didn't talk back much. He stood with his arms tight at his sides, eyes flicking between the growing crowd and the lieutenant's mouth. Whatever Blanchard was saying, it was clear he wasn't sugarcoating anything. Renee had seen enough of these conversations, usually from the other side of a conference table or behind closed doors in state committee rooms. But now she was watching it unfold around her, with her name at the center of it. She walked slowly back to her SUV, opened the driver's side door, and sat down, hands still trembling. The receipt was still tucked inside the paper bag. She pulled it out. Time-stamped, 2:42 p.m. Total, $14.76. CVS logo at the top, allergy medication and almond milk itemized neatly. It felt surreal to hold it, like evidence from someone else's story. She didn't leave right away. The young woman with the phone crossed the street and approached. Miss Alcott, right? She asked, keeping her distance but holding her phone steady. You okay? Renee looked up at her. She looked maybe 19. Hoodie, leggings, hair pulled up high. Sharp eyes, fierce energy. I'm all right, Renee said quietly. Thank you for filming. I've already posted it. Twitter's eating it up. You're trending in Atlanta. People are pissed. Renee exhaled slowly. That was fast. Stuff moves fast when it's this wrong, the girl said. You want me to tag you? Renee gave a small shake of her head. Not yet. Let me figure out what this is before my inbox explodes. Got it. The girl hesitated. That cop's name's gonna be everywhere in about 5 minutes. Renee looked across the parking lot. Dresner was now standing rigidly next to his cruiser while Blanchard talked into his phone, his expression unreadable. I'm not surprised, Renee murmured. You need anything? The girl asked. Renee smiled, tired. I need a long weekend. But no, I'll be okay. What's your name? Annika. Annika Branch. I'm glad you were there, Annika. Me too, she said. Not that this happened. Just that somebody caught it. Annika gave a small wave and stepped back toward the sidewalk, still recording but not saying anything more. The crowd had started to thin now, a few people lingering by their cars or porches. The tension hadn't lifted entirely, but it had shifted. Blanchard returned to Renee's window a few minutes later. I spoke with internal, he said. There'll be a review, and I made it clear that I recognized you immediately and that the stop was inappropriate. This'll go through the formal chain. Renee studied him. Appreciate that, Lieutenant. But you and I both know how those chains work. He paused. I know you've been on the right side of cleaning up messes like this. I also know it doesn't feel any better when you become the example. No, she said. It doesn't. There was a silence between them. Not hostile, but heavy. Do you want me to escort you home? He asked. No, she said. I think I need the drive. All right. He glanced back at Dresner. He's being pulled off duty pending the review. You'll get a call, probably by Monday. I'll be ready. He gave her a small nod, then turned away. She didn't watch him walk off. Instead, Renee turned the key in her ignition and slowly backed out of the parking lot. The paper bag sat untouched in the passenger seat. Her wrists still had faint red lines from the cuffs. And even though she was driving home, it didn't feel like anything was behind her yet. But the real storm was waiting just a few hours away. Online, loud, and hungry for answers. By the time Renee reached her driveway in College Park, her phone had already started buzzing. Missed calls, texts, emails, all piling up within the span of a 20-minute ride. She sat there in the car for a moment, engine off, phone glowing in her lap. Her brother Milo had called 3 times. So had a colleague from the AG's office. One of the texts read, "You're all over the timeline. Videos everywhere. You okay?" She finally answered Milo's latest call. "You all right?" he asked immediately. His voice was sharp, urgent, the way it got when he was angry but trying to sound calm. "I'm okay," Renee said, shaken. "But I'm home. Renee, I saw it. That girl's video? It's got like 100,000 views already. Why was he even... What the hell was that?" She leaned her head against the steering wheel. "He said I matched a description from a shoplifting call. Dark SUV, black woman. That was enough for him, apparently. And he cuffed you? In public? Right there on the sidewalk." Milo went silent for a second. "That's insane." "No," she said. "It's routine. That's the real problem." He let out a breath. "You want me to come over? I'll be fine. I just need a little time to sit with this. Another ping. Another alert. Twitter this time." Renee stepped inside her house and tossed her keys onto the side table, dropping into the couch like she'd been holding herself up for hours. She opened her laptop. She wasn't ready to read everything, but she needed to know what was out there. She typed in her own name. The video was pinned to several viral threads. It had already made it to news aggregators, a few regional journalists, and even a couple of verified legal accounts. The video was only 1.5 minutes long, but it told a full story. A confident woman standing calmly, asking questions, being dismissed, cuffed, and walked to a police cruiser. The girl filming had captioned it. "This woman is a lawyer, cuffed for picking up meds. No apology, no badge check, just another afternoon in Georgia." There was outrage, retweets, demands for action. But there were also the usual replies. She must have said something. Why didn't she just comply? Cops don't just arrest people for nothing. Renee scrolled past them. Then her inbox pinged again. This one was from Chandra Holbrook, an investigative reporter at a local digital outlet. She'd interviewed Renee once before, back when she'd spoken publicly on a policy change around misconduct tracking. Subject: urgent. Interview request. "Renee, just saw the footage. I'd like to speak with you ASAP if you're ready. This story's gaining traction, and I want to make sure your voice is centered before someone else frames it for you. No pressure. Just reach out when you're ready." Renee didn't respond yet. She stared at the screen, reading the words again. Center your voice before someone else frames it. That part stuck. She knew what it meant. The system didn't wait for people like her to speak. It ran ahead, shaped the narrative, softened the edges, called it a misunderstanding. She'd seen that happen to victims who couldn't speak up in time, who were spoken about instead of to. She looked at her wrists again. The marks were already fading, but she still felt the cold of the metal. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her boss, Dorian Reeves, Deputy Attorney General. "Renee, just saw the video. Let's talk first thing Monday morning. You have support. We stand behind you." It sounded nice. But even support like that had limits, especially when public pressure started pulling at reputations and office politics. She knew better than to trust quick statements. She needed to decide what she wanted to say and how she wanted to say it. Renee sat there, laptop open, phone in hand, legal career hanging somewhere above her like a weight. She hadn't wanted attention. She hadn't asked to be a symbol. But now her name was trending, and silence wouldn't protect her. But before she could figure out her next move, someone else was about to shine a spotlight on the officer behind it all. It started with a tweet. An anonymous account posted a screenshot of Sergeant Colin Dresner's badge and nameplate from the arrest footage, tagging several local watchdog pages. "Y'all want to talk about who this officer is? Because this ain't the first time." The tweet included a link to an old post from 2 years ago, buried on a local forum site, where a young man claimed Dresner had pulled him over in a Kroger parking lot and accused him of looking like someone who ran from the scene. Same line, same phrasing. Within hours, other stories began trickling in. A college student from Decatur, a single mother from Forest Park, a former substitute teacher who said she filed a complaint and never heard back. None of them were high profile. None of them had gone viral. But the pattern was too consistent to ignore. By Sunday morning, Dresner was trending in Georgia. Annika Branch, the teenager who filmed Renee's arrest, had been reposting every new name that surfaced, building a thread that grew by the hour. She wasn't just a witness now. She'd become the unofficial archivist of a long paper trail that no one had looked at closely before. One post caught Renee's attention. A woman named Sarita Downs said she'd filed a complaint in 2021 after Dresner allegedly threatened to detain her when she asked why he searched her boyfriend's car without a warrant. She included a screenshot of the response she got from Internal Affairs. Reviewed, no misconduct found. No follow-up, no interview, nothing. Renee sat back in her chair, reading each post like puzzle pieces dropping into place. It wasn't shocking. It was familiar. The kind of internal rot that gets polished over by policy reviews and forgotten names. What was different now was visibility. People were finally looking. She opened her work laptop and pulled up the public database used to track complaints, a login she rarely used outside of audits. She typed in Dresner's badge number. 4 results came up. 2 labeled informal, 1 marked investigated, no action, and another labeled pending review. From her own incident. The notes were vague. Offensive tone. Aggressive handling of routine stop. Subject claims racial bias. Every phrase felt dipped in cold, bureaucratic distance. No reprimands, no suspensions, no pattern acknowledged. Renee took a screenshot. She closed the file, sat still, and thought about how many other files like that were sitting in drawers. How many other names had ended up there, muffled by the language of procedure. Her phone lit up again. Chandra Holbrook had messaged her back, this time with a question. "Did you know Dresner already had 3 complaints on file before yours?" Renee replied, "Yes, just confirmed it. Nothing was done." "Would you be willing to go on record about that?" She stared at the screen. The line between public and private had already been crossed. But there was a difference between being caught on camera and choosing to speak. After a moment, she typed, "I'll call you in an hour." Then she sent another text, this one to Dorian Reeves. "We need to talk. Not Monday. Today." By the afternoon, several outlets had picked up the growing controversy. The city's Civilian Oversight Board issued a short statement acknowledging community concern. The police department tweeted that Dresner had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal review. That phrase again. The one she'd seen attached to so many names. Always temporary. Always vague. But this time was different. Because the story wasn't going away. And now it was Renee's turn to speak. With her own voice and on her own terms. Renee hadn't planned on saying anything public. She preferred courtrooms to cameras, written testimony to interviews. But by Monday morning, her inbox was full of requests. The video had passed 1 million views. Even her old law professor in Oregon had emailed to say he saw her on the local news. That's when she opened a blank document and started typing. She didn't draft a statement like a lawyer. She wrote it like a person who had run out of room to stay quiet. "I wasn't in danger of losing my life that day, but I did lose something." That's how she began. She talked about the stop, about the embarrassment of being handcuffed in front of strangers, about how quickly dignity can disappear when someone decides your voice doesn't matter. She talked about the receipts in her bag, the silence in the car, the way people only believe you once it's too late. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't resisting. I didn't match any real description, but I was still treated like a threat, because that's what some people see first, before the badge, before the words, before the truth. She didn't mention Dresner's name. She didn't need to. She posted it to her personal social media accounts at 9:42 a.m., right before logging into a Zoom meeting with Dorian Reeves and the department's communications team. By noon, the post had been shared over 50,000 times. The responses flooded in, not just support, but stories. Other women, other professionals, people in suits and scrubs and hoodies and uniforms sharing their own moments, times when their job titles hadn't shielded them from assumptions. I'm a nurse. They thought I was stealing meds from my own hospital. Corporate lawyer, got followed through a department store like I was shoplifting. I had my government ID in my hand, and they still called backup on me. It was overwhelming, but it was also grounding. Later that afternoon, she sat for her first on-camera interview with Chandra Holbrook. They met outside a small, neutral office space in Decatur. No flashy lights, no makeup artist, just 2 chairs and a camera operator. "You've worked behind the scenes for a long time," Chandra said, as the cameras rolled. "Why speak out now?" Renee didn't flinch, because I finally understood what it felt like from the other side. All the policies I've helped draft, all the oversight I've argued for, it still didn't stop what happened to me. And if it didn't stop for me, what does that mean for everyone else? Chandra nodded. What would you say to people who are still defending what happened? Who say the officer was just doing his job? Renee paused, then answered simply. If your job lets you ignore a person's words, facts, and identity, then maybe it's time to redefine what that job really is. The clip ran that evening on local news, then got picked up nationally. Renee hadn't expected that. She'd thought it might stay regional, just another firestorm that fizzles out by Thursday. But it didn't. Because people were tired. Tired of the same scripts. Tired of waiting for body cams, internal memos, and carefully worded apologies. Renee had said what many had felt for years, but with a calm that couldn't be twisted into anger. The next morning, someone painted "Dignity looks like Renee" on a wall outside the Fulton County Courthouse. A quiet tribute, but loud in its own way. And through it all, Renee remained grounded. She answered a few interview requests, wrote a short op-ed for a local publication. She didn't flood her feed with posts. She didn't argue online. She just kept showing up, with her words and her presence. But the more she spoke, the more pressure mounted on those who had tried to stay silent. By Wednesday, the story had become impossible to ignore inside City Hall. What started as a neighborhood incident had crossed into press conferences, union boardrooms, and the mayor's morning agenda. The phones at the DeKalb County Police Department were ringing non-stop. Civil rights attorneys were making media rounds. And the phrase, "matched the description," had become a punchline in angry tweets and protest signs. But inside the police union building on Memorial Drive, the mood was different. Closed doors, tense meetings, people choosing their words carefully. Sergeant Colin Dresner had been placed on administrative leave, but only after days of outcry. Some officers backed him quietly. He didn't do anything wrong, but others were distancing themselves fast. The department's PR officer, Lena Stowell, issued a statement that read more like a riddle. "We take these matters seriously and are committed to ensuring proper protocol is reviewed. The department will continue cooperating with the oversight process." No mention of Renee by name, no apology, just lines that sounded rehearsed. Outside the precinct, the protests started. Not huge crowds, but steady ones. 12 here, 30 there. People with signs, flyers, and QR codes linking to Dresner's complaint history. Students from Georgia State. Elderly women from nearby churches. Young professionals holding up printouts of Renee's public statement, and the chant that caught on first. Check the purse before the cuffs. It wasn't just about Renee anymore. It was about what she represented. At the state level, the Attorney General's office couldn't afford to ignore the tension either. On Thursday morning, Renee was called into a closed-door meeting with AG Milton Farrow and a few senior deputies. She arrived early, files in hand, wearing a navy blazer and slacks. Not because she needed to look professional, but because she refused to let anyone reduce her to the woman on the sidewalk in cuffs. Farrow stood when she entered. "Renee," he said, with a half sigh. "Glad you could make time." She sat down calmly. "I figured I'd be seeing you sooner or later." He offered a tight smile. "You've become the face of a very complicated story." "I didn't ask to be." "No, you didn't." He tapped a pen on his desk. "But now we have legislators asking what kind of accountability mechanisms we've been supporting. Whether our office is doing enough to prevent this kind of incident from repeating." "I've been asking that question since I got here," she said flatly. One of the deputies cleared her throat. "There's talk of a joint task force, civilian review boards, transparency policies. I wrote 3 drafts of that policy last year," Renee replied. "No one wanted to touch it." Farrow leaned back. "That's changed now. Pressure creates movement. People want action. And optics." Renee looked at him, eyes steady. "Then make it real. Don't use my face for show while nothing changes behind the curtain." He didn't respond immediately. Then he said, "We'd like you to co-chair the task force." She blinked. "Excuse me. You know the issues. You've lived the impact. You've already got public trust. You'd have oversight on the structure, the data collection, and the review process. And Dresner. He's under investigation. We can't influence that directly. You want me to help clean up the system that put me in handcuffs a week ago. We want you to help fix what's broken. And you're uniquely qualified to do that." Renee took a breath. She could feel the political calculations in the room. They didn't want her out there uncontrolled, making waves on her own. They wanted her involved, inside the system, where her power could be directed. Still, part of her wanted to say yes. Not because of them, because of the people outside, because of Annika, because of Sarita Downs, because someone had to hold the flashlight. "I'll consider it," she said. "But only if the task force includes people who've been stopped, not just the ones who write the rules." Farrow looked surprised for half a second. Then he nodded. "Understood." Renee stood. As she walked out, she passed 2 staffers whispering in the hallway. One of them looked up as she passed. Not with pity, with respect. But not everyone was comfortable with her becoming the face of change, and backlash was waiting around the corner. By Friday evening, Renee finally had a moment to breathe. A quiet one, without phone calls or interview requests, just her and a lukewarm cup of peppermint tea in her living room. The house was dim, but not dark. A small lamp glowed in the corner. Her shoes were still by the door, blazer draped across the armrest. Her eyes were tired, not just from the week, but from what it had peeled back. She sat cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through her phone, not to check mentions but to clear notifications. She wasn't looking to read more about herself. She already knew what happened. What she didn't fully understand yet was what it had done to her. The knock on the door was light but deliberate. She set her mug down and pulled the curtain aside. It was Milo, holding takeout bags and wearing a hoodie that said, "Ask me why I'm angry." She opened the door, smirking. "Don't tell me that's custom." "Nah," he said, stepping inside. "Etsy, made by some teacher in Macon. She's got your quote on mugs now." Renee raised an eyebrow. "What quote?" "I don't carry my title around expecting immunity, but I do expect dignity." He grinned. "You're on drinkware now. Wild times." She rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. They sat down at the table and unpacked the food. Fried okra, grilled catfish, and cornbread from a place they used to visit with their dad when they were kids. For a while they ate in silence. Comfortable. Familiar. Then Milo looked up. "Does it feel real to you yet?" "What part?" "All of it. The cameras, the protests, the offers. The fact that you could have been booked if that lieutenant hadn't shown up." Renee chewed slowly before answering. "It feels like someone else's story. But I know it's mine, because I still wake up thinking I should have done something differently." "Like what?" "I don't know. Been quieter. Said less. Explained more. Reached for my badge first. Milo sat back. That's not your burden. He decided what you were before you said a word. She looked down at her plate. I know, but it doesn't stop the replay in my head. Milo reached across the table and tapped her knuckles. Don't let them twist this. You stayed calm. You spoke up. And now people are paying attention. She nodded, slow and quiet. Later that night, Renee got a call from Sasha, a colleague she'd mentored for years. Sasha was still relatively new to the department, brilliant, driven, and always watching how Renee moved through the system. You okay? Sasha asked softly. I'm here. I've been thinking about something you said to me 2 years ago. Sasha continued. You told me to stay sharp, stay visible, and never assume the room sees your value just because you're present. Renee leaned into the phone. Didn't think that advice would boomerang back like this. It helped, Sasha said. We needed this. Not what happened to you, but the clarity. Everyone's been dancing around this stuff for years. There was a pause. I want to be part of the task force, Sasha added. Renee smiled faintly. Then I'll make sure there's a seat for you. After the call ended, she stood by her window for a while, arms folded. Outside, the street was quiet. Porch lights flickered on across the road. A kid was riding a bike in lazy loops under the street lamp. It felt ordinary, and that's what made it harder. How easily moments can snap between safety and something else. And yet, she wasn't broken. She wasn't running. She was still here, more visible than ever, but grounded in something bigger than the headlines. But even with the public watching, the real change would only come if the system itself was ready to listen and act. Monday came like a reset button, but the weight of the past week hadn't lifted. Renee stood outside the Georgia state capitol in a soft grey suit, her flats planted firmly on the concrete as reporters gathered for the press conference. The backdrop wasn't flashy, just a pop-up banner behind a plain podium, with the state seal stamped across the top. She was flanked by members of the newly announced Police Accountability Task Force, including community leaders, retired judges, and 2 civilians who had previously filed complaints no one responded to. And standing just off-center was Annika Branch, holding a clipboard and wearing a press badge around her neck. Someone had offered her an internship after all this. She accepted, of course. Renee stepped up to the mic. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't soar either. It stayed steady, plain-spoken, deliberate, real. I didn't set out to become anyone's headline, she began. I didn't post the video. I didn't plan the protests. I didn't ask for attention. But I won't reject it now that it's here. She paused just long enough for the cameras to catch their breath. What happened to me was not the worst thing that's ever happened, but it was the most revealing. Because if it can happen to someone who works within the justice system, who knows the rules, the language, the contacts, then we have to ask what happens to the people who don't. Renee looked out over the crowd. She wasn't performing. She was laying down facts. I've reviewed policies for years, sat in rooms with officials who said the right things but did nothing. I've signed memos that sounded like change and ended up in drawers. That ends today. She outlined the first 3 steps of the task force. Independent complaint reviews, public access to misconduct data, and required community interviews during any use of force investigation. Small things, but real. And then she ended the way she needed to, for herself. This isn't just about me. It's about how fast we can be erased when someone decides we're inconvenient. I don't expect immunity, but I do expect to be seen, fully, fairly, and with dignity. The crowd was quiet for a second before the claps came. Not thunderous, but steady. After the conference, Renee walked over to the edge of the steps and stood for a photo with the task force team. Annika stood beside her. Milo waited nearby, arms crossed, looking proud and protective at once. Later, walking back to her car, Renee passed a woman maybe in her late 60s holding a handwritten sign. My grandson was stopped by the same officer. No one believed us. Thank you for speaking. They locked eyes. No words passed between them. Just a nod. Not the kind that ends a conversation, but one that starts a quiet understanding. Back in her car, Renee took a deep breath. Not one of relief, Not one of closure, but one of readiness. The task ahead wasn't glamorous. It wouldn't be quick. There would be pushback, bureaucracy, silence, and more heartbreak. But now, more people were watching. More people were talking. And someone, finally, had opened the door. Before she turned the ignition, she pulled out her phone. No new mentions, no urgent emails, just one text from Sasha. They're not ready for you, but you're exactly who they need. She smiled and typed back, let's give them what they didn't ask for, but always should have had. If there's one thing this story reminds us of, it's this. Titles don't protect people from being profiled. Politeness doesn't stop handcuffs, and dignity shouldn't be something you have to prove. Renee didn't go viral because she lost control. She went viral because she kept her voice when someone tried to take it away. Let that be the lesson. Speak up when it counts. Stay calm, but never small. And when the spotlight finds you, don't step away. Stand taller. If this story moved you, hit the subscribe button. Share it. And remember, someone's silence today might be your silence tomorrow. Make it count.